Word of the extraordinary situation at the human facility began spreading through secret communication networks across the galaxy, creating waves of confusion and curiosity among alien species who had never seen anything like it. The story of Vorthak. Warriors choosing to stay with their human captors was so unusual that many dismissed it as propaganda or misinformation. The Zephyrian Alliance, which had been traditional allies of the Vorthak Empire, decided to send their own investigation team. To discover the truth, their diplomat Velter arrived at Earth expecting to find evidence of human mind control or torture techniques, but instead discovered something that challenged every assumption about interspecies relations. Velter watched through concealed cameras as the human facility operated with a level of harmony and cooperation that seemed impossible according to everything known about species compatibility. The Zephyrians had spent centuries trying to maintain peace treaties with other races through complex negotiations and careful balance of power, yet here, the humans had achieved something greater through simple acts of care. The most shocking discovery for Velter was that the facility now housed not only Vorthak warriors, but also volunteers from several other species who had specifically requested to experience human care. Word had spread through underground networks that humans treated all beings with respect and kindness, regardless of their past actions or species. Origin, a group of Zellan refugees who had been displaced by recent conflicts, had somehow made their way to the facility and asked for sanctuary. The humans had welcomed them without question and had immediately begun providing food, shelter, and medical care. The Zellans were working alongside Vorthak warriors and humans in perfect cooperation. Despite their species having been enemies for generations, Engineer Dongyun had been assigned to lead a remarkable project that combined technologies from multiple species to create innovations that none could have achieved alone. Vorthak strength and endurance, Zephyrian technical precision, Zellan environmental knowledge, and human creativity were being merged into solutions for problems that had puzzled scientists for decades. The project teams met every morning to share ideas and work together on designs for better living spaces, more efficient energy systems, and improved medical equipment. The cooperation was so natural and productive that Velter began to question why his own species had never achieved such collaboration. Darsung had expanded her research to document the psychological and social changes occurring in beings from multiple species under human care. Her findings were revealing that the capacity for growth, adaptation, and peaceful cooperation existed in races that had been considered unchangeable by their own societies. The Zephyrian diplomat observed daily interactions between species that should have been natural enemies yet were instead sharing meals, playing games together, and helping solve each other's problems. The facility had become a living laboratory for interspecies harmony that was producing results no diplomatic mission had ever achieved. Human coordinator Jiang found herself managing an increasingly diverse community that required understanding of multiple cultures' dietary needs, social customs, and communication styles, yet the humans approached each new challenge with the same fundamental principle that every being deserved care, respect, and the opportunity to thrive. The success stories were multiplying as more beings experienced human adoption methods. A young Vorthak warrior named Crix had arrived severely traumatized from battle, but under human care had rediscovered his love of music and was now teaching traditional Vorthak songs to other residents while learning human melodies in return. A Zephyrian scientist called Nexus had come to study human behavior but had instead found herself becoming part of the community. She worked with human researchers during the day and spent evenings participating in group activities that included art creation, storytelling, and collaborative cooking projects that combined recipes from all represented cultures. The facility had developed its own unique traditions that honored all the different species present. They celebrated important dates from each culture, shared stories and legends from different worlds, and created new customs that reflected their mixed community. The residents had become a chosen family united by shared values rather than species. Origin Velter reported back to the Zephyrian Council that the human facility represented a completely new model for interspecies relations based on what humans called adoption psychology. The humans treated every new arrival as a potential family member deserving of unconditional care and support. The psychological profiles that Dr. Soong was developing showed consistent patterns across all species. Beings who experienced human care showed decreased aggression, improved emotional regulation, increased creativity, and stronger social bonds. The changes appeared to be permanent and continued even when individuals faced stress or challenges. The facility had attracted attention from researchers and diplomats across the galaxy, but also from ordinary beings who were tired of conflict and competition in their own societies. Requests were coming in from multiple species asking for guidance on how to establish similar communities. Human diplomat Hyena had begun working with representatives from various governments to share information about their adoption protocols. The techniques were surprisingly simple and centered on treating others with genuine care, listening to their needs, and providing consistent support without conditions or expectations. The spread of information about human methods was creating unexpected political pressure within various alien government. Citizens who learned about the facility began asking why their own societies could not provide the same level of care, security, and respect for individual dignity. Some governments tried to suppress information about the human facility, claiming it was dangerous propaganda designed to weaken military resolve. But the stories continued to spread, especially among military personnel who were tired of constant warfare and were curious about alternatives. Commander Kale had been quietly sharing information with trusted contacts in other Vorthak units, describing what he had observed about his warriors' transformation. The response was mixed, with some commanders expressing interest while others reported him to higher authorities for spreading seditious information. The political implications were becoming impossible to ignore as representatives from multiple species began requesting permission to visit the facility or establish similar programs in their own territories. The humans were willing to share their knowledge freely, but insisted that any adoption program had to be based on genuine care rather than political or military objectives. The Galactic Council, which had previously ignored Earth as a minor player in interstellar affairs, suddenly found itself dealing with requests from member species to study human social methods. The simple human instinct to care for others was generating political and social changes across multiple civilizations. Traditional military alliances were being questioned as beings learned that former enemies could become trusted friends under the right conditions. The facility had proven that species loyalty was less important than shared values and mutual care, creating doubt about the necessity of ongoing conflicts. The human example was inspiring similar experiments on other worlds as beings tried to replicate the caring environment that had produced such remarkable results. Some attempts failed because they were based on political manipulation rather than genuine care, but others succeeded in creating small communities of peace. The phenomenon was spreading beyond official channels as individual beings made personal choices to treat others with kindness and respect regardless of species. The simple human example was encouraging personal transformation that was multiplying throughout the galaxy. As reports continued to flow in about the success of human adoption methods, it became clear that something fundamental was changing in galactic society. The humans had accidentally demonstrated that care and compassion were more powerful tools for creating change than force or negotiation. The revelation that beings from any species could choose cooperation over conflict when given proper support was reshaping political discussions and challenging assumptions about the nature of interspecies relations. The human facility had become a symbol of possibility that was inspiring hope across the galaxy. The human adoption phenomenon had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined when it started with 12 captured Vorthak warriors. What began as a simple act of treating prisoners with basic human decency had evolved into a galactic movement that was fundamentally changing how different species related to each other across the universe. Commander Kale made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Instead of following his orders to attack the human facility, he sent a message to his superiors requesting permission to experience human care firsthand. The response was immediate court-martial and removal from command. But Kale had already made his choice. the former commander arrived at the human facility as a refugee rather than a conqueror and found himself welcomed with the same warmth and care that had transformed his warriors. The humans showed no anger about his previous intentions to attack them. Instead, they treated him as another being who deserved compassion and understanding. Kale, first meeting with his former subordinate Dex, was emotional beyond anything either Vorthik had experienced before. The warrior who had once followed his orders without question now embraced him as a friend and introduced him to the human caregivers who had become his new family. Human facilitator Minsu worked with Kale to help him understand the psychological adjustment that came with abandoning a life based on military hierarchy and competition. The process was difficult because everything Kale had believed about strength, leadership, and success was being challenged by the human example. The Galactic Council found itself facing an unprecedented crisis as entire populations of various species began voluntarily choosing to live with humans rather than remaining in their own societies. The traditional power structures that had maintained order for centuries were being questioned by citizens who had learned about alternative ways of living. The humans were not actively recruiting or conquering, but their simple approach to treating others with kindness and respect was proving more attractive than the competitive and often violent societies that most species had created. The appeal of unconditional care and acceptance was drawing beings from across the galaxy. Diplomatic missions that had been sent to study the human phenomenon often ended with the diplomats themselves requesting to stay. The experience of being treated with genuine care and respect regardless of their species' origin or past actions was transforming. Representatives who had come as observers had become something extraordinary in galactic history. A former warrior who now served as an ambassador between species that had been enemies for generations. His transformation from a killing machine to a peacemaker was documented and studied by researchers throughout the galaxy. Working alongside human diplomat Hyena, Vex helped establish new protocols for interspecies communication based on mutual respect rather than fear or dominance. His unique perspective as someone who had experienced both military conditioning and human care made him an effective mediator. The success of the human facility had inspired similar projects on dozens of worlds as species attempted to replicate the caring environment that had produced such remarkable results. The humans were generous with their knowledge and sent advisors to help establish programs wherever they were requested. Human specialists like Minsu Taeyong and Nari found themselves traveling across the galaxy to teach other species about adoption psychology and care-based community building. Their simple techniques of listening without judgment, providing unconditional support, and treating every being as valuable were being adapted to work with various alien cultures. The programs that succeeded were those that genuinely embraced the human principle that every being deserved care and respect, regardless of their past actions or species origin. The attempts that failed were those that tried to use human methods for political control or military advantage. The original facility on Earth had become a model community that representatives from hundreds of species visited to observe and learn. The daily life there showed what was possible when beings chose cooperation over competition and care over conquest. Dr. Soong research had documented transformations in thousands of individuals from dozens of species. Her work proved that the capacity for growth, change, and peaceful cooperation existed universally but required the right environment to flourish. Her findings were reshaping understanding of psychology and social development across the galaxy. The most remarkable development was the establishment of what became known as the Adoption Accords, a new galactic treaty based on the human principle that every being deserved care, respect, and the opportunity to reach their full potential. The Accords represented a fundamental shift from power-based politics to relationship-based cooperation. The treaty negotiations were unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of arguing about territory, resources, or military advantage, the discussions focused on how to create societies that supported the well-being and growth of all citizens. The humans had proven that this approach produced stronger, more stable communities. Species that signed the Adoption Accords committed to treating all beings within their territory with basic dignity and respect, regardless of their origin. They agreed to establish care programs for refugees, prisoners and displaced persons based on the human model of unconditional support. The Accords also established exchange programs where beings could experience life in other societies and choose where they wanted to live permanently. The freedom to choose their own communities based on personal values rather than species loyalty was revolutionary. Commander Kale, who had once been a feared military leader, became one of the most effective advocates for the new system. His personal transformation from warrior to peace builder inspired others to question their own assumptions about strength, conflict, and leadership. The former commander worked with human psychologist Nari to develop programs specifically designed to help military personnel transition from conflict-based thinking to cooperation-based problem-solving. His success rate was remarkable, as hardened warriors discovered they could be strong and valuable without hurting others. The changes were not without resistance. Many traditional governments and military organizations opposed the adoption movement, claiming it would weaken their societies and make them vulnerable to attack. But the species that embraced human methods found themselves becoming more prosperous and stable, not weaker. The economic benefits of cooperation were becoming clear as species that had previously spent enormous resources on military buildup began redirecting those resources toward education, healthcare, and social development. The results were improved living conditions and higher satisfaction for all citizens. Cultural exchange programs flourished as beings learned to appreciate the unique contributions of different species. Art, music, literature, and scientific knowledge were being shared freely, creating a renaissance of creativity and innovation that benefited everyone. The human facility had evolved into something like a galactic embassy where representatives from various species lived and worked together on projects that benefited all participants. The innovations emerging from this cooperation were advancing technology, medicine, and social development at unprecedented rates. Children from various species were growing up together in mixed communities, learning from an early age that differences between species were sources of strength rather than reasons for conflict. These young beings were becoming natural ambassadors for interspecies cooperation. The transformation was not complete and many challenges remained, but the foundation had been established for a new kind of galactic civilization based on the simple human understanding that every being was worthy of care and respect. The adoption phenomenon had proven that love and kindness were more powerful than force or fear. What had started as 12 captured warriors finding a new family with their human captors had grown into a movement that was reshaping the entire galaxy. The humans had given the universe something it had never known before: the possibility of peace based on mutual care rather than mutual fear. The story of human adoption had become legend throughout the galaxy, inspiring hope that conflicts that had lasted for millennia could be resolved through understanding and compassion. The simple human instinct to care for others had become the foundation for a new era of Gal. The crisis moment arrived when High Command of the Vorthic Empire sent direct orders to Commander Kale that could not be ignored or delayed. He was commanded to launch an immediate full-scale assault on the human facility to retrieve the captured warriors and eliminate all human personnel. The orders came with threat of court-martial and execution if he failed to comply within 3 days. Kale stared at the communication device in his command center, knowing that he was facing an impossible decision. His military training demanded absolute obedience to orders, but everything he had observed told him that attacking the facility would destroy something precious and unique that his warriors had found. The attack would harm the very beings he was supposed to rescue. Before launching any assault, Kale decided he needed to communicate directly with his captured warriors to coordinate their rescue and gather intelligence about human defenses. He activated his emergency communication system and sent a coded message to Vex, who had been his most trusted subordinate before the capture. The response he received was unlike anything in Vorthic military history. Vex answered the communication, but instead of providing tactical information or expressing relief about the planned rescue, he politely declined to be rescued. The conversation that followed challenged everything Kale understood about loyalty, duty, and military service. FX explained in calm, measured words that he and the other warriors had found something with the humans that they had never experienced in their own society. They had discovered what it felt like to be valued for who they were rather than just for their ability to fight and destroy. The humans had shown them a way of living based on care, cooperation, and mutual respect. The former warrior told his commander about the daily life at the facility and how different it was from their military existence. He described waking up each morning without fear of punishment or failure and going to sleep each night knowing that he was safe and cared for. The simple security of being accepted unconditionally was something he had never imagined possible. Kale listened with growing confusion as Vex talked about his friendships with the humans and how these relationships had taught him about emotions and connections he never knew he could experience. The warrior spoke with genuine affection about Minsu and the other human caregivers, describing them as family members who had welcomed him with open hearts. When Kale asked about military duty and loyalty to the Empire, Vex gave an answer that shook the commander to his core. The warrior explained that he had discovered the difference between loyalty based on fear and loyalty based on love. With the humans, he felt genuine care and concern for their welfare, while his loyalty to the Empire had always been motivated by fear of punishment. The other captured warriors shared similar feelings. When Kale spoke with them individually, each one expressed gratitude for the care they had received and genuine happiness about their new life. None of them wanted to return to the constant stress and competition of military service. They had found peace with the humans and were afraid of losing it. Warrior Grix, who had been the most aggressive and difficult to capture, told Kale that the humans had helped him understand that his anger and violence had been covering deep pain and loneliness. The therapy sessions with human psychologist Nari had shown him that he could be strong and valuable without hurting others. The warriors explained that the humans had never pressured them to stay or made their care conditional on cooperation. Human facilitator Kyung had made it clear from the beginning that anyone who wanted to leave was free to do so, but she had also worked with them to understand their own feelings about the choice. This freedom to choose was something completely foreign to Vorthic military culture, where every decision was made by superiors and individual preferences were ignored. The warriors were experiencing autonomy for the first time in their lives, and they were using that freedom to choose care over conflict. Conversation revealed that the warriors had developed a deep understanding of the difference between their old life and their new one. In the Empire, they had been valued only for their fighting ability and were constantly afraid of failure or replacement. With the humans, they were valued as individuals with unique thoughts, feelings, and contributions. Kale realized that his warriors were not being brainwashed or manipulated by the humans, but were making informed choices based on their own experiences. They had compared two ways of living and had chosen the one that made them happier, healthier, and more fulfilled. The human approach to prisoner care had accidentally revealed something profound about Vorthak nature that their own society had never recognized. The warriors had natural capacities for love, creativity, and cooperation that had been suppressed by military conditioning but flourished under human care. As the deadline for the assault approached, Kale found himself paralyzed by an impossible moral dilemma. His orders demanded that he rescue warriors who did not want to be rescued and destroy humans who had shown more care for his people than the Empire ever had. The mission would cause harm to everyone involved. The warriors had become so integrated into the human community that they were now essential parts of the facility operations. They helped with daily tasks, contributed to group decisions, and provided emotional support to newer arrivals. Their removal would devastate both the remaining humans and any future prisoners who might benefit from their experience. Human coordinator Jeong had somehow created an environment where beings who had been enemies for generations could live together in harmony and mutual support. The facility had become a model of interspecies cooperation that was unlike anything else in the galaxy. Kale began to understand that the humans were not just caring for individual prisoners, but were demonstrating a completely different approach to conflict resolution. Their method of treating enemies with kindness and respect was proving more effective than any military strategy at creating lasting peace. The more he learned about the daily life at the facility, the more Kale realized that the humans had discovered something that could change the entire nature of galactic warfare. They had shown that even the most hardened warriors could choose cooperation over conflict when given the proper environment and support. The impossible choice facing Kale was not just about following orders or protecting his warriors, but about choosing between two completely different philosophies of life. He could follow military protocol and destroy something beautiful, or he could find another way that honored both his duty and his growing understanding of what his warriors really needed. As the hours passed, Kale found himself questioning not just his immediate orders, but the entire foundation of Vortex society. If his warriors could be so much happier and healthier under human care, what did that say about the empire that had shaped them? What would happen if other Vorthek discovered this alternative way of living? The communication from his warriors had revealed that they were not lost or confused, but had found clarity about what they truly wanted from life. They had experienced unconditional care and had chosen to embrace it rather than return to a system based on fear and competition. The deadline for attack was approaching, and Kale knew that whatever decision he made would change everything, not just for his warriors and the humans, but potentially for the entire galaxy. The human facility had become something more than just a prisoner care center. It had become a beacon of hope for a different kind of future. Commander Kale found himself in the most impossible situation of his military career. His superiors in the Vorthek Empire were demanding immediate action to rescue the captured warriors and destroy the human facility, but every day of surveillance showed him that his warriors did not want to be rescued. They were happier than he had ever seen any Vorthek, and they were thriving in ways that should have been impossible for their species. The orders from high command were clear. Kale was to lead a strike team to the facility, eliminate all humans, and bring the warriors back to the Empire for proper military reconditioning. But how could he rescue warriors who did not consider themselves prisoners? The situation was unlike anything in Vorthak military history, and Kale had no idea how to proceed. Through his spy cameras, he watched as Vex continued to grow closer to his human caregivers, especially Minsu, who had become like an older brother to the former warrior. Vex would follow Minsu around the facility, learning new tasks and asking endless questions about human culture and values. The attachment between them was so strong that Vex seemed genuinely concerned about Minsu's health and happiness. The emotional development that Kale observed in his warriors was disturbing to everything he understood about his own species. Vex had begun expressing worry when humans seemed tired or stressed and would offer to help with extra tasks to make their lives easier. This caring behavior was completely foreign to Vorthek nature, yet it seemed to come naturally to Vex under human influence. What made the situation even more confusing was how the humans responded to this care from their former enemies. When Vex would bring Minsu a cup of tea or help him with paperwork, Minsu would express genuine gratitude and appreciation. The humans treated every small kindness from the warriors as if it were a precious gift from a beloved family member. The daily interactions between humans and Vorthek had evolved into something that looked exactly like a family dynamic. The warriors would ask about the humans' personal lives and remember important details about their families and interests. The humans would share photos from their homes and tell stories about their childhoods, creating bonds that went far beyond simple friendship. Human engineer Taeyong had formed an especially close partnership with warrior Grix, who had been the most aggressive of the captured soldiers. When Grix first arrived, he had tried to attack several humans and refused to eat or sleep for days, but Taeyong had patiently sat with him, offering food and water without any demands or expectations. Slowly, Grix began to accept small kindnesses from Taeyong and eventually started asking questions about human technology and engineering. The two began working together on projects to improve the facility, designing better heating systems and more comfortable furniture. Their collaboration had produced innovations that neither human nor Vorthak technology could have achieved alone. The transformation of Grix was particularly shocking to Kale because this warrior had been known throughout the Empire for his brutal efficiency in battle. Yet here he was carefully adjusting the temperature controls to make sure everyone in the facility was comfortable and staying up late to finish projects that would make life better for his human friends. The humans had somehow taught the warriors to think about the needs and feelings of others rather than just focusing on their own survival and advancement. This change in thinking was creating behaviors that the Vorthek Empire would consider treasonous, but the warriors seemed happier and more fulfilled than they had ever been in their military service. Human psychologist Nari continued her individual sessions with each warrior, helping them understand emotions and thoughts they had never been allowed to explore. The warriors were learning that feelings like compassion, empathy, and love were not weaknesses, but strengths that could make their lives richer and more meaningful. The sessions with Nari were revealing aspects of Vorthic psychology that had been completely suppressed. By their military culture, the warriors had natural capacities for art, creativity, and emotional connection that had been buried under layers of military conditioning. The humans were helping them rediscover these lost parts of themselves. Kale watched as warriors who had been trained to follow orders without question began making their own choices about how to spend their time and what activities they wanted to pursue. Some chose to work in the garden, growing plants and flowers. Others preferred art projects or music lessons. The freedom to choose was something none of them had experienced before. The facility had established what the humans called family meetings, where everyone would gather to discuss any problems or concerns. The meetings were conducted with everyone sitting in a circle, and each person was given a chance to speak without interruption. The Vorthic warriors had never experienced this kind of democratic decision-making. During these meetings, the warriors would express their thoughts and feelings about life and the facility and suggest improvements or changes. The humans would listen carefully and often implement the suggestions, showing that they valued the warriors' opinions and input. This respect for their ideas was something the warriors had never received in their own military hierarchy. The most disturbing development for Kale was watching his warriors begin to express concern about the welfare of their human caregivers. When human staff member Hyena caught a cold, several warriors insisted on bringing her soup and medicine and checking on her. Throughout the day, they were genuinely worried about her health and wanted to help her feel better. This caring behavior extended to all aspects of daily life. The warriors would notice when humans seemed stressed or tired and would volunteer to take on extra tasks to help. The humans would do the same for the warriors, creating a cycle of mutual care and support that strengthened their bonds every day. The transformation was so complete that the warriors had begun creating their own traditions that combined human and Vorthic customs. They established special celebration days to honor both cultures and created ceremonies that recognized important moments in their shared life together. These new traditions were becoming more meaningful to them than anything from their past. Kale realized that the humans were not trying to erase Vorthic culture, but were instead helping the warriors discover which parts of their heritage brought them joy and which parts had been imposed through military conditioning. The warriors were learning to celebrate their Vorthic identity while also embracing human values of kindness and cooperation. The success of the human approach was creating ripple effects that went beyond the facility itself. Word was spreading through secret communication channels that there was a place where Vorthic could live without fear or violence, and some warriors from other units were beginning to ask questions about surrender and capture. The intelligence reports that Kale was receiving from other fronts showed that human treatment of prisoners was consistent across all their military operations. They treated every captured being with the same care and respect regardless of species or past actions. This universal compassion was becoming known throughout the galaxy and was affecting military morale on all sides. As Kale prepared for another difficult communication with his superiors, he struggled with how to explain that the rescue mission they were demanding would actually be harmful to his warriors. The warriors had found something with the humans that they had never experienced in their own society, and forcing them to return would destroy the peace and happiness they had finally discovered. The human facility had become more than just a place of care. It had become a proof that different species could live together in harmony when they treated each other with respect and kindness. The warriors and humans were creating something new together, a way of life that was better than what either group had experienced separately. Kale found himself wondering what would happen if the Vorthic Empire could learn from this human approach to relationships and conflict. Would his own people be happier if they lived with cooperation and care instead of competition and fear? The questions were dangerous for a military commander to think, but he could not stop himself from imagining the possibilities. 3 days after his first shocking discovery, Commander Kale found himself unable to stop watching the human facility. The behavior he had witnessed was so strange that he needed to understand what was really happening. His spy cameras showed him that the humans had created something they called an integration protocol, and it was unlike anything he had ever seen. Dr. Soong was a human scientist who spent her days studying how the Vorthic warriors were changing under human care. She carried a small device that recorded everything and took notes constantly, but not in the way military interrogators would work. Instead, she seemed genuinely fascinated by how quickly the alien warriors were learning human ways of living. The most amazing case was still Vex, who had transformed from a fierce killer into something that looked like a human family member in just 3 weeks. The humans had given him his own small room with a bed, soft blankets, and even personal items like books and art supplies. Vex had decorated his room with drawings he made during art time and photos of his new human friends every morning. Vex would wake up and help the humans prepare breakfast for everyone. He had learned to cook simple human foods and seemed to enjoy the work of caring for others. When new Vorthic warriors arrived at the facility, Vex was often the first to greet them and help them feel safe. He would speak to them in their own language and explain that the humans were not going to hurt them. The daily routine at the facility was structured like a family schedule rather than a military operation. Everyone ate meals together at the same time, and the humans made sure that each Vorthic warrior had tasks that made them feel useful and important. Some helped with cooking, others worked in the garden that had been planted behind the building, and a few assisted with cleaning and maintenance. Human soldier Dong-Yun had become especially close to Vex, and they spent many hours together talking about their different worlds and cultures. What had started as basic communication lessons had grown into deep conversations about life, dreams, and fears. Dong-Yun would tell Vex stories about his human family, and Vex would share memories of his life before the war. The friendship between Dong-Yun and Vex was something that should have been impossible according to everything the galaxy knew about the Vorthac, yet here they were sitting together in the garden, laughing at jokes and helping each other with daily tasks. They had even created a special handshake that combined human and Vorthac gestures of friendship. Commander Jeong was the human leader of the facility, and she had established rules that treated the Vorthic warriors as honored guests rather than prisoners. Every morning, she would visit each warrior personally to ask about their needs and make sure they were happy and healthy. She never gave orders or made demands. Instead, she would make suggestions and ask for their opinions. The integration program included group activities designed to build trust and understanding between humans and Vorthac. They played games together, worked on art projects, and even had music sessions where both species would share songs from their cultures. The Vorthac had never experienced recreational activities in their military society, and they seemed to love these new experiences. One of the most successful activities was cooking lessons, where humans and Vorthac would work together to prepare meals using ingredients from both cultures. The warriors were amazed to learn that food could be prepared for pleasure and taste, rather than just nutrition. They began experimenting with flavors and spices, creating dishes that neither species had ever tasted before. The human approach to conflict resolution was completely different from anything Kale had seen in his military career. When disagreements arose between the warriors or between humans and Vorthac, the humans would sit everyone down in a circle and encourage them to talk about their feelings. They would listen carefully to all sides and help find solutions that made everyone happy. Kale watched through his cameras as warrior Grix, who had initially been the most hostile of the captured Vorthac, slowly began to trust his human caregivers. At first, Grix would sit alone in corners and refuse to participate in group activities, but the humans never gave up on him. They would bring him food and sit quietly nearby without forcing conversation. Gradually, Grix began to respond to the patient kindness of human engineer Taeyong, who would spend his free time just sitting with the lonely warrior. Eventually, Grix started asking questions about human technology, and Taeyong was delighted to share his knowledge. Soon they were working together on projects to improve the living spaces for everyone in the facility. The transformation that Kale observed in his warriors was profound and disturbing. They were developing emotions and behaviors that had been completely suppressed in Vorthek military culture, the warriors were learning to express gratitude, joy, curiosity, and even affection. These feelings had been considered weaknesses in their society, but the humans treated them as natural and healthy. Human psychologist Neri had created a program to help the Vorthak warriors understand their own emotional needs. She would meet with each warrior individually to talk about their feelings and experiences. Her approach was gentle and non-threatening, and the warriors began to open up about fears and dreams they had never shared with anyone. The warriors were discovering parts of themselves they never knew existed. Some found they enjoyed creating art, others loved working with plants in the garden, and a few showed natural talent for music. The humans encouraged every interest and provided materials and instruction to help the warriors develop their new hobbies. What amazed Kale most was that the humans were not trying to turn the Vorthak against their own kind. They never spoke badly about the Vorthak Empire or tried to convince the warriors that their former life was wrong. Instead, they simply provided an alternative way of living based on kindness, cooperation, and mutual respect. The warriors began to compare their new life with their old one, and the differences were striking. In the Empire, they had lived in fear of punishment and failure constantly, competing with each other for resources and recognition. With the humans, they experienced safety, acceptance, and the freedom to be themselves without judgment. The facility had become something like a large family where everyone took care of everyone else. The humans and Vorthak shared responsibilities and worked together to solve problems. The warriors, who had been trained since birth to see all other species as enemies, were now planning birthday parties for their human friends and creating gifts to show their appreciation. Dr. Sung documentation showed that the changes in the warriors were not just behavioral but psychological as well. The constant stress and aggression that had defined their personalities in the Empire were being replaced by calmness and contentment. The warriors were sleeping better, eating with more enjoyment, and showing genuine concern for others' welfare. The success of the integration program was beyond anything the humans had expected. They had started with the simple idea of treating their prisoners with basic human decency, but had accidentally discovered a way to fundamentally change beings who were thought to be unchangeable. The warriors were not just adapting to human culture, they were thriving. And as Kale continued his surveillance, he realized that his warriors were not being held against their will. They were choosing to stay. The humans had made it clear from the beginning that anyone who wanted to leave was free to do so. But none of the warriors had expressed any desire to return to their former life. The daily reports that Kale was supposed to send to his superiors became more difficult to write each day. How could he explain that his fierce warriors were now helping humans bake cookies and singing lullabies to help younger warriors fall asleep? The transformation was so complete that even Kale began to wonder what it would be like to experience such care and acceptance. Humans had not conquered the Vorthak through force or trickery, but through something far more powerful: the simple act of treating others with unconditional love and respect. This approach was creating changes that no amount of military pressure or political negotiation had ever achieved. And it was happening naturally through the basic human instinct to care for others. Commander Kale pressed his long blue fingers against the cold metal surface of his ship and stared at the screen showing planet Earth below him. His red eyes were wide with confusion as he watched the strange behavior of the humans through his advanced spy cameras. The Vorthak Empire had sent him here to study human military strength, but what he was seeing made no sense at all. Down on the planet surface, in a building near the human city called Sol, something impossible was happening. The humans had captured 12 Vorthak warriors during their last battle 3 weeks ago. Every alien species in the galaxy knew what happened to prisoners of war. They were questioned harshly, then either killed or kept in tiny dark cells until they broke. But the humans were doing something completely different. Through his spy cameras, Kale could see his fellow Vorthak warriors sitting in a bright, clean room that looked nothing like a prison. The walls were painted in soft colors, and there were comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Plants grew in small pots near the windows, and warm light filled the space. It looked more like a place where humans went to relax than a place to keep dangerous prisoners. A human male named Jehun was sitting with the Vorthik warriors, and he was showing them pictures drawn on white paper. His voice was gentle and patient as he pointed to different images, trying to teach them human words. The captured warriors who should have been planning escape or attack were instead listening carefully and even asking questions in their broken human language. Next to Jihoon sat another human called Minsu, who was handing out small soft blankets to each Vorthik warrior. The blankets were colorful and warm, and the warriors were wrapping them around their shoulders like human children would do with their favorite toys. Some of the fierce Vorthik soldiers were even rubbing the soft material against their faces with expressions that looked almost peaceful. But the most shocking thing Kale saw was how one particular Vorthik warrior was behaving. This warrior was called Vex, and he had been known throughout the Empire as one of their most deadly fighters. Vex had personally destroyed 3 human ships and killed dozens of human soldiers in battle, yet here he was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to Jihoon and carefully copying human letters onto a piece of paper. Vex would write a letter, then show it to Jihoon, who would nod and smile with encouragement. When Vex made a mistake, Jihoon would gently guide his hand to help him write the letter correctly. There was no anger or punishment, just patience and kindness. The deadly warrior who had struck fear into human hearts was now learning to write like a small child, and he seemed happy to be doing. Ida, human female named Hyena, entered the room carrying a bag full of medical supplies. She wore a white coat that marked her as a healer, and her face showed the same gentle expression as the other humans. She moved slowly and carefully around the Vorthik warriors, making sure not to frighten them as she checked their old battle wounds. When Hyena knelt down next to a warrior who had a bandaged arm, the warrior did not pull away or show aggression. Instead, he rolled up his sleeve and allowed her to examine his injury. She cleaned the wound with soft movements and applied fresh bandages while speaking to him in a calm voice. The warrior even said thank you in broken human language. When she finished, Kale felt his heart beating faster as he watched this scene unfold. The Vorthak were bred for war. From the moment they hatched from their eggs, they were taught that all other species were enemies to be destroyed or conquered. They had no concept of kindness or care from outsiders, yet these human strangers were treating his warriors like they were precious family members. In one corner of the room, another human named Dong-Yun was teaching a group of Vorthik warriors how to play a simple human game. The game involved moving small, colorful pieces around a board, and the warriors were laughing as they learned the rules. Their laughter was a sound that Kale had never heard from his own kind before. The Vorthik did not laugh or show joy in their empire, but here they were making happy sounds like human children. The strangest part was that the humans were not trying to get information from their prisoners. There were no questions about Vorthak military secrets or battle plans. Instead, the humans seemed genuinely interested in teaching the warriors about human culture and making them comfortable. The warriors were sharing stories about their own lives, and the humans listened with real interest. Through his listening devices, Kale heard Vex telling Jihoon about the food they ate on Vorthak homeworlds, and Jihoon was writing notes and asking questions about flavors and cooking methods. It was not military intelligence, it was just normal conversation between beings who were getting to know each other. The human was treating the deadly warrior like a friend. He wanted to learn more about. When mealtime came, the humans brought the Vorthik warriors to a dining area where tables were set with clean plates and proper eating tools. The food was prepared specially for Vorthak dietary needs and was served in portions that would satisfy their large appetites. The humans sat at the same tables and ate the same food, showing that they trusted their former enemies completely. Kale watched as human soldier Minsu helped one of the younger Vorthik warriors named Grix learn how to use human eating tools. Grix had been injured in battle and his hands were still healing, so holding the small human utensils was difficult. Minsu showed him different ways to grip the tools and even helped guide his hands during the meal. What made this scene even more incredible was that Grix had been the one who had destroyed Minsu's brother's ship during their last battle. The record showed that Minsu had lost family members because of Grix's actions, yet here was Minsu treating Grix with the same care he would show to his own injured brother. There was no anger or desire for revenge, just pure kindness. As the day continued, Kale watched the humans prepare comfortable sleeping areas for the Vorthok warriors, each warrior was given their own bed with soft coverings and pillows. The sleeping area was not locked and there were no guards watching. The humans trusted that the warriors would not try to escape or cause harm during the night. Before the warriors went to sleep, Jehun and the other humans visited each one to make sure they had everything they needed. Some warriors asked for extra blankets. Others wanted a drink of water, and a few just wanted someone to talk to for a few minutes. The humans provided everything that was requested without complaint or suspicion. The last thing Kale saw before ending his surveillance for the day was Dex approaching Jehun with a small drawing he had made during their art time. It was a simple picture of a Vorthok and a human standing together under a bright sun. Vex handed the drawing to Jehun and said in careful human words that he was grateful for the kindness he had received. Jehun accepted the drawing with a big smile and immediately found a place to hang it on the wall where everyone could see it. He told Vex that it was beautiful and that he would treasure it always. The deadly warrior, who had been trained to kill humans, was now giving them gifts, and the humans were accepting these gifts like they came from beloved family members. Commander Kale turned off his spy cameras and sat in his command chair trying to understand what he had witnessed. The humans were not just caring for their prisoners, they were treating them like adopted children or beloved pets. This behavior went against everything the galaxy knew about warfare and prisoner treatment, but somehow it was working. The Vorthok warriors were not trying to escape, they were not planning attacks, and they were not providing military secrets under torture. Instead, they were learning human customs, making friends, and even creating art. The humans had accomplished something that no other species had ever managed. They had tamed the untamable Vorthok through simple acts of kindness and care. As Kale prepared his report for the Vorthok Empire, he realized that he would have to describe something that his superiors would never believe. The humans had discovered a power greater than any weapon they possessed, the power to turn enemies into family through the simple act of caring for them like they were precious beings deserving of love and protection.